This is the Studebaker Avanti. Joining me today is Tommy Myers, who owns Studebaker Restorations, where we're at today. Tommy, what is it about these cars that makes them so fantastic, so unusual?
It was ahead of its time for 1963, the first year they come out with the Studebaker. It was designed really to compete with the Corvette, being it was the only other fiberglass built car in 1963 that was made in the United States. It was designed on two platforms to begin with, which was a R1, which was a normally aspirated car, and the second one was called an R2, which was a supercharged, normally aspirated car. Power difference was substantial, so Studebaker decided to build it so that it was either a family sports car or a hot rod enthusiast car. And it was a really hot item in '63 when they first come out. Everybody seemed to want one because of the history behind the car and the technology that Studebaker went into to build it. It was one of a kind.
It's fiberglass, and it was the same supplier making these bodies as Corvette was using, and they had this massive agreement with General Motors. General Motors was not real excited that all of a sudden their manufacturer for the bodies of the Corvettes is now producing these Studebakers, and they demanded that their product be on time. They didn't care about the Studebakers.
The same plant that was building the fiberglass body for the Corvette was building the fiberglass body for the Avanti. There was a big ruckus over it with General Motors over the fact of that, so they had to change a few things with fiberglass setup on the Avanti. The glass on it is much thinner than a Corvette. The Corvette body is a lot thicker and weighs a lot more. The Studebaker body is at least half the weight of a Corvette body.
There was a problem though. Studebaker, the assembly line, they were not accustomed, didn't understand fiberglass. When the fiberglass actually cures, it shrinks slightly, and things didn't fit quite right. The engineers hadn't accommodated for that, so they had difficulties making the panels fit.
The panels on the Avanti, the prototype models, were more of a piece of a car instead of a complete bonded car body. So they went ahead and redesigned, the engineers did, where everything with the fiberglass would fit properly. The chemical content on it, they changed just a little bit so that the fiberglass wouldn't shrink. It would keep the same form as the mold.
It turned out to be such a problem that Studebaker stopped offering cars in black because when the panels did not fit and the car was in black, you could see it like crazy. It would just pop out. It was obvious. So to fix that problem, you can either go back and do an engineering change or just stop offering cars in black.
Black is one color that shows every flaw in a body. Anything that's out of the proportion is going to show up immediately with a black car. So they kind of started building cars in colors that didn't really show the flaws in the car. As the years went on, they were able to get that problem taken care of. In the later models, in the Avanti 2s, they did start building them in black, because by then, in '66, '67, it was the technology had caught up enough that they could figure out how to make the fiberglass smooth.
These Avantis, there was a very famous owner of one of these, and that was Ian Fleming.
Yes, sir.
Ian Fleming, of course, is the guy who created and wrote all the James Bond books, created the character. And I believe he envisioned himself as something of a James Bond man about town. He had one of these in black. I believe it was a stick shift.
Yep, an E4 speed.
He drove it around London. You talked about two different engines. You got the R1, the R2. There's also an R3 and just a couple R4s. Now, when you said naturally aspirated, that means it has a carburetor, it's not fuel injected.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the blue one has a supercharger, also with a carburetor. Okay, so what then would be the difference between these and an R3 or an R4?
The R3 version, they were able to put a condensed blower box on it instead of a dome bonnet. The dome bonnet just sit right on top of the carburetor, and then the R3 had an enclosed box, so it could give more pressure to the carburetor and its running power. The difference basically was the heads were a little bit different, the camshaft was different. It was more of a race car engine than it was a street car.
Okay, so you can get the luxury tourer version, which this one is here.
Yes, sir.
This is more the race car version. This car set world records for the fastest car at the Bonneville Salt Flats of all production cars.
A Bonneville record break.
Still holds the record for that.
And this is a full flow motor?
This is a full flow R2 engine. The R model meaning it being a full flow engine.
Okay, so it circulates more oil to cool it.
Well, what it is a full flow engine, the oil filter on the side of the engine is on the bottom, and it gets its first flow of oil right from the oil pump, from the oil pan. So any debris coming out of the bottom of the engine is picked up immediately at the oil filter, so it doesn't get moved up into the engine. The early models had an auxiliary oil pump that sit on top of the engine and would catch only between 5 and 6 microns of dirt. As a matter of fact, this R1 here has been upgraded, and instead of using a carburetor now, we're using a fuel injection system, and we also upgraded the ignition system on it to an electronic ignition system, so the car would be much easier to drive and keep tuned.
But it still looks like a carburetor.
It looks like a carburetor, but the change on it is morning starts are instantly. The response from the engine is almost, goes up by 25%, and the fuel economy goes up, and also the power band is much stronger on it.
This thing at the firewall that's sort of shaped like a radiator, what is that?
This right here is a stainless steel cage over the electronics on the car. The reason why they did this is because if you don't shield the electronics, the RF coming off the engine, your radio will pick it up and you'll have nothing but a buzz box instead of sound. There's no way to keep it. A metal car shields it with a steel and the firewall. Being this is fiberglass, there's no shield for it.
These rims are an upgrade over the hubcaps, dramatically better than the hubcaps.
Yes, these was a factory option at the time. They were called Magnum 500 wheels. Ford, General Motors, and Pontiac also used it as one of their upgrade wheels also. But they came in a couple of versions. This version is the chrome-plated wheel. A lot of the cheaper brands had a beauty ring around them instead of the chrome around the wheel itself. It just had a welded-in center on a steel wheel.
The back window is huge. It has to be one of the biggest rear windows ever made. It's just enormous, enormous, this back window.
The back window on these cars is one of its characteristics that most people like because of the fact you have plenty of view out the back. There was only one downside to them. Whenever they would run the car in Bonneville, setting to the land speed record, they had to actually tape the window down because it would blow out. The wind pressure inside was so strong it would blow the back glass clean out of it.
Tommy, at the back end here, it's got that curve and then the sharp angles on it.
Yeah, it blends with the car, the way the body form is and the way the car is shaped. And it has a Studebaker script across the back. If you notice, there's no lock on this at all. It has an inside latch that you pull to open the trunk lid on this car.
This car is unique, had a built-in roll bar, yeah?
It really has two. It has the one right behind you, and it also has one in the front over the windshield pillar.
Now, probably the most unique thing on the dashboard is in here, in the glove compartment. You call it a glove compartment? Right, you pull this thing out, this flips up.
That's for the lady to do her makeup in the car. It's her vanity. And she even has a place to put her makeup in the bottom if she needs to.
All right, Tommy, you said this car is fun to drive?
Yes, sir.
Let's go for a ride.